Rydo, and we're back to video game news for Friday, December 13th. Friday the 13th again, which I believe is always the case. If you have one Friday the 13th in October, you're going to have a Friday the 13th in December, just because of the way the numbers of days work out there. But yeah, certainly have seen some memes out there around Friday the 13th and Christmas being mashed together. For the catch-up section, I'm going to say one thing and try not to get into too much details, but I have found out that probate in the United States can be $6,000 plus. So if you happen to know anybody that is having to deal with that, or thinking that they're going to have to deal with that, and frankly that's everybody, because everybody's going to eventually die, it's crazy that you would have to have that extra cash handed to somebody else, whoever's going to deal with your final accounting after passing. I don't know, I'm not really using the right words here, but and yeah, the only real way I guess you could avoid probate is to, specifically for houses, put the house in the name of somebody else, which for a lot of people that may already be the case, or you may be married so it may just go to your spouse. But yeah, now cars on the other hand, same thing. It might be easy to put the car in the name of someone else too. A lot of things like bank accounts, retirement accounts, things like that have payable on death clauses where they are actively going out of their way to avoid probate. So if you can just make sure that when you die, or when somebody dies, they have nothing of any value, you can just ignore it and not do probate and all. But yeah, even one house is going to be a problem, or one car might be a problem. And yeah, nobody seems to really talk about that or tell people about that, and certainly it's unpleasant to talk about end of life or past life accounting, but it's clearly an example of one of the things that should be taught in school and isn't. You know how the joke always is that you should be taught how to balance a checkbook. Nowadays, balancing a checkbook is not even that valuable. Paying the taxes has become more of the joke. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about and dealing with for the past couple days. That being said, I also did watch bits of the Game Awards, and we're going to have a lot of news about the Game Awards today. One thing I will say off the top of it, the Game Awards is clearly given special permission to do some things that most content creators on YouTube can't do, in that they have this year had no less than 3 simultaneous live streams all going at the same time on the same channel, and there's just no way to do that for your average content creator. If I started another live stream using OBS right now going to YouTube, it would reject it almost certainly and not actually have it stream. One of their most ridiculous live streams, some of them kind of make sense, like ASL, American Sign Language stream, but honestly that really should just be a visual layer on the same stream, and that highlights some of the failings of YouTube, is that you can't just have alternate video angles or alternate camera angles like you could back even on DVDs. Even maybe some of the CD videos had that kind of functionality, although it wasn't used too much on DVDs as far as alternate camera angles and stuff. But But then the most ridiculous one was a vertical live stream that did absolutely nothing with the top and bottom of the screen. It simply took the landscape video of the regular live streams, put it somewhere in the center, and then had a static image at the top and a static background at the bottom. There was no text there, there's no extra information, the video wasn't being reframed for that. Now, if you were going to do something like that properly, you would have a camera director shooting the whole film, the whole experience in such a way where they were panning and scanning live to make sure the most important information always was in that that portrait perspective. But yeah, that would be incredibly difficult to do for very little reasons. Plus, this is a vertical live stream, but it's going well over 3 minutes, at least an hour, probably 2. That was the entire live stream. So you're making a vertical live stream for what I imagine is an audience of almost 0 people. I don't know how many people want to watch an hour-long Game Awards presentation that is vertical when you could just watch it horizontal. And even if you were watching it in vertical mode, the horizontal video would look better than what they were presenting, because at least on YouTube, the YouTube app, if you're watching a horizontal image in vertical mode on your phone, then there is a scrolling chat at the bottom, or perhaps ads at the bottom. So this vertical live stream on YouTube almost certainly was just them copying something that, or restreaming something that was going to some other platform that only allows for verticality. Which I don't know if that's TikTok or what, but it's pointless to have even done that. If you were actively trying to watch the Game Awards last night, there would have been so many different options. I could see a good percentage of people, 2-3% of people, just getting confused and clicking on the long video, or not watching any of them at all. Also, certainly the Game Awards does just a terrible job of flooding their channel and flooding YouTube subscriber feeds with then sub-cut trailers for all the games that they just showed. It just makes a whole deluge of videos that are competing against each other in a poor way. Then we'll get into more detail as we start to cover it, because I think Gamatsu in particular has an article for almost every game announced. In general, before we start getting into details and before my opinion changes too much, because I really only briefly looked at the thumbnails of most of the trailers that were posted. I didn't actually sit through it. It feels like it was a fairly safe year with not many announcements of anything particularly new feeling. And it definitely feels like, once again, it is not particularly focused on anything that looks like it's coming from Japan as far as games being announced. Although there were a couple of mobile games, and it does feel like maybe the push for mobile games is going up. Here we can see Marvel Rivals still getting a good audience, although it is 120,000 concurrent players lower than from its peak. That's not super surprising though. I'd also say the Game Awards still really hasn't learned their lesson about having stairs all the way wrapping around the front of the stage, although I don't believe there was an incident this year. It just feels like that should never really be the case. that somebody could just run up there from the front. Plus, I don't even think that looks particularly good. They probably aren't even showing it on the feed, but just to the audience, seeing winners of awards turn their back to the audience and climb upstairs seems silly, when the obvious solution here would be to have stairs on the sides of the audience and the floor, and then winners would be asked to anybody who was potentially nominated even for an awards would be moved into temporary seating on the sides, and then the winners would be like on one side or the other, and then they would get up and walk upstairs on the side where the cameras aren't pointed, and then they would come on to stage from the sides. And then they would leave the stage going back the way they came, and then they'd go back to their regular seats. Yeah. But yeah, they don't do that for some reason. They haven't figured that out. The whole presentation still definitely feels, as far as the Game Awards, as it is 80 to 90% advertisements with some kind of ridiculous occasional orchestras, or I believe oh no, I've forgotten his name now. Snoop Dogg. Yeah, I believe Snoop Dogg did a performance too, so they're perhaps expanding on that, because certainly Jeff Keighley, in previous years, it has come off as more elitist as far as the kind of music, just a high orchestral, weird type music. When in reality, if you really were doing like a People's Awards, it would make a lot more sense for there to be pop people and rappers in particular singing the songs or doing presentations around video games. Yeah. But yeah, my opinion may slightly change once we start getting into the details. As far as what people are playing, it doesn't seem like too much has changed according to SteamDB, which no real reason to expect it would, other than Marvel Rivals doing well. And certainly my chart here, I don't think is going to change for quite a while. Although we can notice that Deadlock has dropped. And see, that I haven't even been marking that, but all of a sudden now we have Deadlock much lower, because it was around here. And that is something that I feel like is an accurate representation, certainly, in that Deadlock had some enthusiasm as a beta game, as a game that's not released yet, but it's not keeping momentum now. It's not getting constant updates. Deadlock very much feels like a game that was actually leaked instead of a game that was fake leaked, and that had a whole year-long publishing plan where they would constantly add updates and while in beta and keep people's attention and try to grow a huge audience while still claiming to be in beta. The Valve News Network guy, Tyler McVilkerson, teasingly puts out something that labeled Half-Life 3 on his videos every time in the title. It has Half-Life 3. So he questioned whether Half-Life 3 was going to be announced at the Game Awards, which I think there's a zero chance that would ever happen. I think Valve would make their own personal announcement on a separate day where it didn't have to compete, nor do I think Valve really would want to do anything with the Game Awards. Notably, this year, I didn't even see any Steam Decks being given away. So for the past 2 years, in the middle of the Game Awards, they were giving away Steam Decks to viewers. I didn't even hear anything about that this year. So if anything, it seems like Valve doesn't need the Game Awards, or isn't continuing with Jeff Keighley in the Game Awards. Which I still would like to see Steam Decks given away, but perhaps the Steam Awards themselves is a better place to do that from their own website. Or just random giveaways of the Steam Deck throughout the year might make some sense. Plus, they're already selling refurbed OLEDs now, so they are reducing the price for everybody instead of giving away one free one to one person every now and then, which is more helpful overall. Yeah. As far as Steam's front page here, we have a Bandai Namco publisher sale going on, and I bet we're going to scroll down the front page and not see anything at all about the Game Awards. Well, I guess I was wrong. Well, happy to be proven wrong so quickly, I guess. Better to be wrong for a short time than for a long time. So yeah, it is the third link, and we will look at that. And this may prove me wrong again, in that they may have been giving away Steam Decks and I just didn't pay that much attention to it. Yesterday in particular was not a very productive day. I just needed a day off to refresh myself mentally. I have been getting recommended more videos about organizing kitchens, which is part of what I've been doing as far as cleaning house. And one of the recommendations that I'm surprised I didn't realize myself, but it's not super surprising, that there's probably a ton of stuff I haven't thought about or don't know about. And sometimes just having somebody say something even somewhat basic can be something for me that has gone over my head. But one of the suggestions was to put dishes that you're using the most in the cabinet that is closest to the dishwasher. I'm like, oh, that's not the setup I have right now at all. And so yeah, when I start to think about it, even for somebody with bad feet like me, that there's a lot of extra steps that I've been taking just when doing dishes, like 2 or 3 extra steps per dish to put it up in the cabinet, just because it was in the wrong cabinet. Yep. And so yeah, I probably still have a lot to learn as far as cleaning house, and the best I can hope to accomplish, I think, right now is that I'm just going to get rid of a ton of stuff, and then eventually that is going to leave me to start getting into the finer details about where stuff is in particular. Yeah, and my kitchen in particular is a nightmare. It is way poorly designed, way too small. So every single square inch needs to be evaluated and thought about. So as far as the Game Awards, I kind of don't care about the winners, but here, that's what they're going to highlight first and foremost. The reason I don't care about the winners is because this is just Jeff Keighley's friends, a subsection of mainstream video game journalists giving out awards. It's not a popular vote by actual gamers who actually play games. So some of the argument against them ignoring Japanese games, I think, exists this year more than previous years, in that we have Metaphor ReFantagio and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth both winning. Just a more global focus as far as a soccer game winning. And even Frostpunk 2 is a little bit different. Remember, it is also worth pointing out, though, for 2024, that United States focused AAA games not really getting made. Even things that are owned by Microsoft, like Hellblade 2 here, was actually developed by a UK based company. Prince of Persia Lost Crown giving almost a concession award here, in that it wins this award, but the team has already been disbanded. I did hear from some other people that apparently they talked about some of the layoffs, and I do feel like the Game Awards in particular should have to put some pressure, is going to have to put some pressure out there for more unionization and for more employee protections, because it is just getting crazy, and it certainly is insane that a game up for an award has already been disbanded. The team has already been disbanded. Balatro talked about way too much to not get an award. Black Myth Wukong, same thing. Tekken 8 feels like that would have probably won Best Fighting Game, just because there's not that much competition. Baldur's Gate 3 makes a lot of sense. Helldivers 2 makes a lot of sense. And then from the winners, we have a new Ninja Gaiden game, which yeah, I guess maybe you would call that a Japanese game. Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, which highlights an issue. Certainly, I can't hover on these things or they're gonna glitch. Though, see if we can reload and get that back. But yeah, it's certainly a statement that Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is coming out instead of a Last of Us Part 3 or spin-off. There's a game called Thick as Thieves that will take forever to actually come out. I don't even know what Screamer is. Split Fiction is basically that exact same game as It Takes Two, in that it is yet another game that requires co-op gameplay. It is a different setting and different characters, certainly, but it is that same concept. Microsoft subsidiary, I assume, owns Turok, so the Turok Origins is a really late announcement for a Turok game, when there should have been Turok games coming out 5 years ago, and it clearly only got greenlit because of the success of Horizon Zero Dawn. Plus, it's now a 3-player co-op game from the looks of it, instead of being a single-player game. Even if it has massive success, I still wouldn't really anticipate that it leads to a long revitalization of Turok as a series. Crimson Desert, don't even know. Elden Ring DLC, I assume. I didn't even see Catley. Celesta, again, maybe a JRPG game. Shadow of Labyrinth, I didn't see. One Move Away is a smaller game. Rematch is yet another soccer game, I guess. Stage Fright is possibly yet another co-op only game. Dispatch is a strategy game, I think, that is going to try way too hard to sell itself. And then these featured games are games that are already out and may have been mentioned or may have had trailers at the Game Awards, but weren't world premiered at the Game Awards. But yeah, we still don't really know anything about Tales of the Shire that would, other than the weird look of it. Indiana Jones is doing really well. Things like Killing Floor 3 and Civ 7 are going to be big. There was a deeper trailer on Borderlands 4 that was shown. It seems like it's going heavy into robots and more people with mechanical elements to it. And so it feels like it might just become too much of that one theme. There are going to be 4 new characters, none of which look particularly amazing as playable characters. And it doesn't really feel like too much is really going to change in Borderlands 4 from the trailer they've shown right now. It's just going to be, I imagine, more of the same. Which, you know, I'm not sure that's going to work, really. Several more games. There's this Dying Light the Beast, which I assume is not just DLC for Dying Light 2, but instead is going to be a separate spin-off game, because I doubt they would try and force people to buy Dying Light 2 since that sold poorly just to play this new spin-off DLC. Almost certainly, though, it was going to be integrated DLC at some point for Dying Light 2. Otherwise, it's not particularly impressive enough to really talk about. Double Dragon Revive. New Mafia game going back to the past and the beginnings of the Mafia, which is the smart move in my opinion. Although weirdly, I saw someone talking about it and saying that they loved Mafia 3, and I'm like, well, if you loved Mafia 3 that nobody liked, you're probably not going to be in the audience for Mafia the Old Country, which almost certainly is going to try and be much closer to Mafia 1. And yeah. And I guess these are just nominated titles that didn't win things. I guess Shadow of Erdtree didn't win Game of the Year after all. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Game Awards falls into that same category where the next year they say DLC is not available for consideration outside of maybe a best continuing or best evolving game. Then they're highlighting some 2023 winners, which some of these games I don't even remember coming out in 2023. Then Wholesome Snack separate awards. There was definitely something on the channel of the Game Awards also, in that it was female protagonist special stream, or developed by women special stream. I believe it was developed by women, and the anime character females, they decided to be the presenters on that. Definitely didn't feel like something that every single game developer, female game developer, would appreciate. Yeah. And it certainly is a problem when you have like Wholesome Snack partner event. You have Day of the Devs partner event. It's just way too much game. Even if this was E3, it does not make sense to have this many games highlighted in the same breath. It is just total insanity. Latin American Gamers Showcase, December 10th to the 17th. Yeah, this is way too many events all at the same time. None of these games are going to get the proper coverage they deserve. And somebody really needs to just be the adult in the room and sit down half of these small independent character game developers and say, look, just take the L and announce your game in January. It's not that big of a deal. Your game's not coming out during the Christmas season anyways. People aren't going to just wildly scroll down these pages and wishlist all these games and remember all these games when your game is coming out. But yeah, it's very ridiculous. Here's the women-led games, and yeah, I don't know if there is a single female avatar that you could even make for women-led games, but I definitely think a kind of anime-esque, although probably drawn by a Westerner, dual hair colored girl is it. Compare this girl in particular, I would say, to the Steam Delivery anime girl, and the Steam Delivery anime girl is drawn very subtly and not very wild. And there's another one that's not even being shown here that has like deer horns. I think in particular you would just go with a logo. Maybe you would just have a female circle with an arrow sign. Actually, that may be the male sign, I don't even know. But yeah, I think having a human avatar probably sells it better, but I don't know what you can do that would cover all these different developers. And my assumption here on that seems to be echoed correctly when you look at the screenshots of the games that are being highlighted, in that there's just a wide variety of screenshots and animation styles here also. Yeah, there's very little connecting through point here too. Although I can't really rage too much around the idea of women-led games, although inherently you can easily have a game development company where there's a female figurehead and secretly it's just being run by some male, and 99% of all the other employees, or every other employee, is just male. In the game industry in particular, that's very possible that would be the way things go. Yeah, same can certainly be said for Black Voices in Gaming, although take note here that Black Voices in Gaming just going with a logo, not having any kind of black avatar. Yeah, less games actually being highlighted there. Yeah, in past winners of previous years, if I haven't gotten around to playing them, which the vast majority of them I haven't, this award season is not going to really push me even further down that direction. It's just going to make me feel bad about how few games I've actually gotten around to playing. If I was going to try and make more mainstream footage, I certainly could go down this list and just play all the games that are already on my wish list of this list, and that would be the most mainstream videos. But I don't think a ton of that's actually going to help me too much. This is also, each one of those in-library games that I've covered tend to be the games in the past that have gotten the least amount of views anyways, even in the cases of trying to rush it, which I definitely tried to rush it with The Witcher 3 and get the footage out as fast as possible, and that did not help me at all. So yeah, nothing particularly too impressive around. Go ahead and put that on the wish list now. That's rated very positively and not in early access. But yeah, nothing particularly impressive around the Game Awards, and I don't think there ever really will be. So, the Video Games Chronicle articles, let's go through them. Epic Games Store and Good Old Games have announced their latest free PC games. Lord of the Rings, Return to Moria, and The Whispered World are free to claim on PC. It's interesting that this article is combining two separate things, though, because the Epic Games Store and Good Old Games are not in any way connected. And at a certain point, if you are going to combine that for that, then you should probably just have a monthly announcement for also things like Amazon Prime, things like that. But yeah. I heard something outside. I'm gonna pull up my outside camera real quick here just to see that there wasn't some kind of major delivery or what. Might actually be raining outside. On the other hand, I did just also move a bunch of stuff, so it might be that something just fell over. Well, I'll have to deal with that later. What I would give for a soundproof room that was completely isolated from the outside. Of course, that would never happen. And it's probably better for in case of emergency that wouldn't happen. Yeah, I don't see a way you really should be combining these kinds of articles, because even if these announcements happen to occasionally be on the same day, it just makes more sense to have two separate articles. That's the only thing that gets you more page views, that gets you more ad views. So why merge it together? First Berserker Kazan gets a March 2025 release date. Yep. Like pretty much all new games, all we can really go by is the teaser trailers and the trailers. Just figure out if there's any interest at all, and then you have to wait until it actually comes out, or at least a demo comes out, to actually play it to see if it plays in any way people would be happy with. Helldivers 2 receives a major update. Special edition DualSense controller is coming soon. Again, that feels like two different stories getting combined. You don't see too many special edition controllers for the PlayStation, but yeah, maybe that is the way it's going to start going, is we'll see more of that. Let's see, Netflix's Squid Game Unleashed is going to be free for everyone at launch. It won't be locked behind a subscription paywall either. This is a cartoony looking Fortnite inspired visuals, I think, for a mobile game. Definitely just a promotion for Squid Game, and definitely there was effectively a whole ad in the Game Awards for it. Yeah, and I imagine people will play it on their phones and find that the game is not particularly that interesting and then stop playing it. But I don't think Netflix even cares for it to be a particularly successful game as much as it cares that it gets people interested in watching season 2 of Squid Game, which they probably invested too much money into. Midnight Murder Club is coming to PS5 as well as Steam in early access. In early 2025. One of the problems with the titles on the videos, when they would put out the Game Awards would put out a trailer, is they would have the title of the game, such as Dying Light the Beast, and then without any comma, space, new line, or anything, it would be capital World Premiere. So when I saw that title first, Dying Light the Beast, I read it as Dying Light the Beast World, which also sounds like a very fine title for a game. And then it was just a premiere. So yeah, there's a problem in the labeling. Certainly those titles are pretty long too, but yeah, it definitely did not make for easy reading. Yeah, Dying Light the Beast is the actual name. It's going to be released in summer of 2025. And the question certainly, is it a standalone game? I would think, yeah, it is. It was originally planned as story DLC for Dying Light 2 Stay Human, and now it is its own standalone game, not getting a title. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dying Light takes a really long time to ever come out with a Dying Light 3, and may very well just never do that. And it may very well be that Techland's new strategy is going to be to release smaller standalone games that are spin-off side games, and at some point they may even make something that is not in that Dying Light Dead Island 1 style of gameplay. Dying Light in a lot of ways is in danger of going down the exact same path of Borderlands, in that Gearbox really can only make more Borderlands games to even catch people's attention, and Techland may very well want to make a completely different game. But I would say the era of game developers being allowed to experiment and make different styles of games is increasingly disappearing, and you are getting pigeonholed by your first biggest success, and then never allowed to ever experiment in any kind of different genre or series or just gameplay mechanics. Yeah, it's not a particularly good situation. Steel Paws is a new mobile game from Yu Suzuki, which this would be Shenmue's creator, I guess, coming to Netflix games. So more and more, it definitely feels like mobile Netflix games were getting promoted here. Whether or not it had kind of an anime art style to it gets hurt when Netflix games is involved, because I wouldn't be surprised if this really is just some Laotian animators or Korean animators being paid less to make that same kind of style. But yeah, mobile I think is going to be the bigger complaint by far this year. A new Pac-Man game called Shadow Labyrinth is a sci-fi 2D action platformer. This is from Bandai Namco. Interesting. Didn't even see this one. Let's watch this trailer. So it's in the Pac-Man universe, but it's called Shadow Labyrinth, which makes it feel like this is the most ridiculous concept ever. Yeah, I think there's a level of desperation and insanity here that Bandai Namco is doing that makes this feel like this is a joke. Like it definitely feels like if you were going to even take this general concept of having a Pac-Man like device, you would have to set it like it was some kind of robot or toy or something that was just inspired by Pac-Man, not an actual Pac-Man. It's crazy. And I wouldn't feel good about a big glowing yellow Pac-Man in this game. I definitely would expect it to have a skin to be in a darker art style to match with that. In a lot of ways, it feels like it's just trying to be a Metroidvania with Pac-Man being crammed into it. Yeah, and that's crazy, and that's not what I think Pac-Man fans want in any ways. But yeah. Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. I'm not a big enough fan really to know anything about Ninja Gaiden, so it may be a case that this is directly in line with what people would want from a new Ninja Gaiden game, or it may be that this too is some weird tragedy happening. Let's see. Every major announcement here from Video Games Chronicle has been just rounded up together, and then my skins here have made it impossible to actually read any of the text, so we will have to just move on from that. Astrobot won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, which that's another great example of mainstream video game journalists just kind of latching on to something, falling into groupthink, literally just colluding with each other to give the awards to whoever they want to give it to. I think if you polled mainstream video game actual gamers, they would not say Astrobot is the game of the year. Although in fairness, I'm not sure what they really would say. The game of the year is Balertro. Maybe, but maybe not. Like, no, there is definitely a chance that if you were to do a survey just right now amongst gamers, they might give Marvel Rivals Game of the Year, just because it's fresh and in the mind of people. But I don't think Astrobot has enough content and enough people played it, particularly since it's a Steam exclusive, to deserve Game of the Year. And I guess it's been a long time since anybody has made the argument that game exclusivity games should not be in consideration. But yeah, all those Xbox gamers, which apparently are nobody amongst video game critics, definitely wouldn't be saying Astrobot is Game of the Year. All the Nintendo gamers out there wouldn't be saying that. All the PC gamers wouldn't be saying that. You'd think that those three audiences combined at least would offset PS5 exclusivity. Naughty Dog announced a game called Intergalactic to Heretic Prophet, which Heretic Prophet didn't really show anything particularly special or unique, other than they've got this head shaving badass female protagonist. Hideki Kamiya's new studio Clovers is working with Capcom on an Okami sequel, so it is important to remember, I guess, that Kamiya left Platinum Games last year. Which, speaking of Platinum Games, the spin-off, little girl spin-off of Bayonetta, Ceres and the Porcelain Demon or something like that is the name of it. I saw that on sale for Slick Deals for the Nintendo Switch, and I'm like reminding myself, oh yeah, that game came out. And that game came out maybe a year or two ago, and it's already been completely forgotten in my mind. It was such a weird decision to take a mature action game and then make a spin-off game that looked like it was targeted for little kids based off of Bayonetta. Meanwhile, it is also, I guess, worth pointing out that not a lot has been announced or done around Platinum Games in the past few months. In this year. Astral Chain, I believe, was a year ago. I don't think that was Platinum Games either. I guess maybe it was. Mafia: The Old Country, new protagonist and plot, obviously. Now, they're calling it the fourth game in the series. I would potentially argue that it is a soft reboot of the Mafia series, and that we won't just have a Mafia 5 come out next. But we'll see. Sonic Racing Crossworlds has been announced, which I don't think it's been that long since the last time there was a Sonic Racing game. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing was in the 2010s, so I guess it has been nearly 15 years. No, the last Sonic Racing game was released 5 years ago, so yeah, just about the perfect time, maybe a year late of what you would expect for a 4-year development cycle. Onimusha's Way of the Sword is coming in 2025. It's the first main Onimusha game since 2006. I definitely feel like a lot of the announcements were very safe. Let's make remakes, let's make continuations, let's make sequels. I don't feel like even the new things that were announced are particularly experimental. I think we probably should be ready for a new focus, a new theme. I don't know if that's pirates or cowboys or back to war or something new, but yeah. Overall, it does kind of just seem like it's more of the same. Warframe 1999 might be the only expansion or announcement that is actually going to come out before the new year, or even come out anytime soon at all. Third-person Turok game, Turok Origins, is in development. It'll be the first new Turok game in 17 years, although there have been some remakes. And it's Saber Interactive and Universal. So apparently Microsoft doesn't own Turok? I thought they did, but I guess I was wrong. Yeah. So the problem with Turok, in my mind, is it was always an also-ran series. They had the potential to be a major impactful series, but wasn't released, didn't play particularly well enough, was too ambitious, and yeah, the long 17 years of lack of support for the series has hurt it severely, and clearly it only got greenlit because of the success of Horizon. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was secretly in development for the past 5 or 6 years, and just now have they gotten to a point where they're ready to even announce that it's in development. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a project that's going to be close to 10 years long, if anybody actually admitted to that. Let's see. Ruga Gotoku reveals its latest game called Project Century. It feels like a Dragon game from what I could see. So, yeah, it doesn't feel any different than any other a Dragon game, and they do seem like they're churning those out perhaps a little too often. There you are. The same company is also making a new Virtua Fighter game. And this trailer I didn't find very helpful at all as far as actually showing much. But yeah, I don't know of a new Virtua Fighter game is really going to knock the socks off of the fighting community or any other gamers at all. Gearbox showed off the first Borderlands 4 gameplay, and this is exactly what I wanted, just to kind of highlight. Here's your 4 new playable characters and protagonists here, and just kind of highlight what I feel like is fairly dull visuals. It does seem like they are going heavy into diversity, or at least people with tan skin, but everybody seems to be covered in a decent amount of more metallic armor and robotic type feeling as far as how the characters go. This female character, feeling maybe a little bit more cyberpunk, feels very much also still like a Mad Moxie ripoff, to the point that she even has a tattoo on her breast in the same way that Mad Moxie did. Although maybe she's just yet again the newest siren, which is very possible. Then she has just like this metal bra and then metallic belts and robotic leg armor. And then this guy is your heavy guy, and he seems completely ripped from God of War and just a ton of metallic. Even doing the God of War, let's show some man nipple things. Metallic codpiece, robotic arm, more robotic legs and armors. Then you have yet another lady of color, which honestly I'm not sure. I'd say maybe this is a white guy, maybe this is supposed to be a white woman, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's Latino of some feeling. That definitely feels like a black guy. Which, yeah, you're getting very much deep into accusations of being woke when all 4 characters are minorities compared to the real world. You can see this girl has some kind of tubing connection, more armor on the chest. The whole point of the shields in Borderlands, more robotic leg looking stuff. The whole point of the shields, though, was that you would have just like a shield thing on your belt highlighting it, and then there would have been a lot more room for fashionable clothing instead of wearing armor. You just run into the major danger that either in a sequel or just based on different armor being equipped, all of a sudden every single character is just going to be in full sets of armor and not visible, and that doesn't feel like that leads to the running and gunning and having fun mentality you should be having with Borderlands. But yeah, there's even here you start with this robotic thing on this trailer and robotic hands breaking a Pandora mask, which my understanding is that Pandora was destroyed after the events of Borderlands 3. And yeah, you have this giant robotic bad guy lady who seems to be controlling more robotic psychos now, and she looks a lot more like the Queen of Blades from StarCraft 2 than what I would expect. And that feels like that is just going to be the full focus of the entirety of Borderlands 4. And then you have this contrasting army of what look like maybe more polished robots, but that seems like that's pretty much it. And even in this, you're seeing entire armies fighting against armies, which is not what Borderlands has ever been about. Then they're showing you several different areas, none of which look particularly that good, and more robots. Yeah. So, yeah, color me unintrigued, certainly from this trailer. Pod racers, as far as flying ships. Claptrap is coming back, guns are coming back. Although, noticeably, only this little section there do they even really show guns. Some of the creatures and animals are coming back. A whip ability for at least one of the characters, if not all the characters, which is straight out of Bulletstorm. And then you have a robotic vault gate being charged up by the guy. So yeah, Claptrap already being an annoying robot. Borderlands 4 feels like it's just going to be full of more annoying robots. And I don't know what you really do to change it up. I think you perhaps are failing horribly in that if you've destroyed Pandora, which was a desert planet, and you were already on a different planet on Borderlands 3, you probably should just go with a much more natural feeling planet for Borderlands 4. A lot more trees, a lot more grass, perhaps not as much like dirt and grime and pollution. Make it a little bit more of a forest planet type experience. I definitely don't see the point of all the armor and the robots. I think that certainly could have been one faction, but it shouldn't be robots versus robots plus Claptrap. It's just crazy. Now, any of these character classes, in fairness, could play great, but I think Borderlands has constantly had a mistake in not letting you go back and play as the original characters, who really I would have much preferred to just play as the original characters for each series. Even if you let me play only as one of the original 4 playable characters in Borderlands 1 per sequel, that would have meant that by Borderlands 4 you would have been on the last characters. And that would have been a cool concept too. If you played as the sniper Mordecai in Borderlands 1, then you couldn't play as Mordecai in Borderlands 2, 3, or 4, giving a completely different experience for everybody, but then balancing it out in that each person does have to play as somebody. Or you could have gone with like a Darksiders idea where there was 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and in each game, one of those characters you played as, and the other 3 were just talked about. But we are approaching well over 16 playable characters that really just boil down the character classes and have very little personality otherwise, with the Borderlands series the way they've done it. And yeah, even like Diablo, which is clearly what Borderlands was originally inspired by, has that same problem in that there are character classes. You can name your character, but none of them are particularly unique or special, and none of them really stay around for the next sequel. Wargaming announced Steel Hunters, a free-to-play mech hero shooter, which probably is a niche game, so wouldn't be surprised too much. The Outer Worlds 2 gameplay debuted. This is not to be confused with the Outer Wilds, which the names I confuse more than the actual games, because I actually, in my mind, have not memorized what either one games are. I believe the Outer Worlds is allegedly created from people who worked on Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3. That's what it just said. Which there is definitely an argument, instead of trying to play Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, then Fallout 4, to instead just play The Outer Worlds 1 and now The Outer Worlds 2. A much more modern series with less commitment as an option. So I guess if that is the case, the thought here would be to contrast The Outer Worlds 2 to Outer Worlds 1 and to Fallout 4. And if all of a sudden there was just a bunch of base building. One thing I think The Outer Worlds does probably focus more on is running and gunning though, and less VATS style. But I also didn't see any perks or any kind of system like that being highlighted in the trailer. Yeah. The Fallout creator Tim Kaine is consulting on the game. Which, you know, that could be very little input, and it may not even be good input. So yeah, It Takes Two studio has lights. New game was Split Fiction, where apparently 2 writers are thrown into these kinds of mind-reading virtual machines as a bad guys trying to steal their writings. Except for the big twist here is one of the writers only writes fantasy and one of the writers only writes sci-fi, which then lets them create a game that is probably the merger of 2 failed projects, in that half of the levels are sci-fi and half of the levels are fantasy. But it does feel like there isn't even that much room for conflict there. You would think a writer, even if it's not their favored genre, could handle themselves perfectly fine in sci-fi if they write fantasy stories. Because let's just admit it, half of all sci-fi stories and fantasy stories are doing the same things. You have a magic potion that heals you, you have nanobots that heal you. Basically the same thing. But yeah, you have a bad guy trying to steal their stories from their minds, and then 2 female protagonists stuck together. But some of the levels here, as they start to get shown, feel very individualized and isolated, and that they just don't feel like it's going to be a cohesive experience. You've got some Panzer Dragoon stuff, you've got running and sliding and 2D platforming, and yeah, I think a lot of this may very well turn into just running from point A to point B. But yeah, the actual gameplay is not one cohesive concept. And they were very enthusiastic about talking about how these story elements progress, because that's pretty much, I think, all they've got, is that they're telling a story, at some point a very weird story. Yeah, I don't even know what you would do there. Like, you have 2 people trapped in their own stories. You would want to give them some kind of agency over how the stories take out, and I don't think any of the levels are going to give them that kind of control. So it then probably is just moving from point A to point B, and then you see a cutscene and go to a different world. But yeah, if you put a writer in their own story, it probably, in my mind, would have to be something closer to like Alan Wake, where you're just being attacked by monsters in your horror story over and over again. And even in that, you still are moving from point A to point B in Alan Wake, which is true for most games. But yeah, I don't know what kind of writer powers you could give people until you get into something very creative, like potentially finding pieces of your story as pieces of paper, collecting them all, running around, maybe 3D platforming to collect them all. As you collect more pieces of the paper, more of the world comes into being, and you can expand yourself that way. Yeah, that would probably what I would want to do if the protagonist had to be a writer. And certainly you could, in this case, have, since you have two writers, one fantasy and one sci-fi, you could have a mix and match version where each region of a map could be a sci-fi version or it could be a fantasy version, and whoever reaches their piece first affects how much they control the world, or making it more fantasy or more sci-fi, or perhaps that affects how easy it is to move throughout the world if some areas are sci-fi versus some areas being fantasy. And I definitely would like to see a more open world where there's just this magical border where fantasy people are walking through this magical wall, and then they walk to the other side and they are now in sci-fi garb and just don't even recognize that this NPC has converted themselves into a completely different setting and different world and different appearance. But yeah, that's what I would want to do with that concept. But inherently, Hazelight's goal here is to just sell you basically the same thing you already have been sold, as far as It Takes Two. And that almost certainly is because there was just so much critical acclaim around It Takes Two. And honestly, I'm not sure how many people really played it. Certainly it isn't in the top 100 games right now, as far as I know. And this is another disappointing trailer, I think. The creator of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, Fumito Ueda, who I imagine might be very old, has a game called Project Robot, the final, which I don't know if it's just called Project Robot or Project Robot. Yeah, I think it's just called Project Robot. That is the final title, which this trailer definitely makes it feel like it's supposed to be set in a distant future of the next Guardian, Shadow of the Colossus. Notice that they're not even talking about the last Guardian, not the next Guardian. But all this really shows is him climbing up this robotic head that looks like it might be a thing from the last Guardian, and then the robot head flying away as some kind of great darkness comes to eat everything. And notice it takes basically 50 seconds before you even start to see any footage. So he's just got nothing there. He gets projected, he climbs to the top of this, so this is definitely Shadow of the Colossus feeling. But even if that was gameplay, that's worse gameplay than Shadow of the Colossus, because you were climbing on the fur more freely of the Guardians. You weren't climbing on yellow glowing ladders. And then you have this robot head that turns into a hover jet and rips itself apart from the rest of the body and flies away. So yeah, none of that really feels like Shadow of the Colossus. And I think inherently even The Last Guardian struggled to actually feel like Shadow of the Colossus. Yeah, his style, I would argue, has not expanded, has not evolved. He doesn't seem like he has a new idea. really, that anybody's particularly that interested in. It feels like you might be decades behind just getting into robots now, when most Japanese people would have been into robots decades ago. Sorry, my phone keeps making noise. But yeah. I've got like 3 phones at the moment in my room, and yeah, I haven't had time to move my old phone to my new phone. Then I have yet another extra phone. But yeah, I am thoroughly unimpressed by this trailer, just because it doesn't show anything. I'm thoroughly unimpressed because it doesn't seem like it's proposing much either, as far as a new style of game. And Shadow of the Colossus in particular was probably groundbreaking decades and decades ago, having an open world, having these giant Colossus monsters that you had to fight, having gigantic boss fight sections. Although notably it's missing a lot of stuff that you might expect from like Breath of the Wild in comparison, which Breath of the Wild has all those things and a lot more. And yeah, there really just hasn't been enough of an evolution from Shadow of the Colossus to anything else as a 3D platforming series or as a Colossus killing series. None of it has evolved, and all of it has taken way too long to be developed. Let's see, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is coming to PC next month. Is that specifically Steam, or does it say Steam and the Epic Games Store, January 23rd? Good news for that. A co-op standalone game, Elden Ring Night Rain, has been announced. So it is its own standalone game, not DLC. I feel like they could have gotten away with making that DLC, but I guess that's better for the gaming community overall if we see less forced main game purchases. Co-op aspect there. And I'm going to use the word disappointment, I think, a lot today. And I will have to say I was fairly disappointed with the Witcher 4 trailer, in that they went the incredibly safe route, which, you know, it seems like that there was a decent chance they were going to do that. They've never really gave Ciri as a character that much personality, so now you can make this older Ciri even more of a different character from what you've seen her as in the past. And yeah, the trailer definitely plays on her dealing with a mostly patriarchal anti-woman group sending a woman out to be sacrificed. Now, I will say, and I won't play this trailer because there is an early part there where the sacrifice lady is being bathed, and so you're seeing a lot of skin, although I'm not sure you're really seeing any boob or butt in the trailer. So they aren't going to back down seemingly from that, from showing skin, but they may very well be backing down from the idea of romance and sex being potentially a positive experience. Although a lot of times in Witcher 3 it was not a positive, in some of the times in Witcher 3 it was not a positive experience either. But it had been my hope, and I believe I even said this in the last stream, that the Witcher 4 would be set thousands of years in the future, and that the events of Ciri and characters all would be gone. With Ciri being still alive, there's definitely a chance that Geralt might still be alive and just mentioned. There's definitely a chance that all of the other main characters may still be alive and may just be older. So it just doesn't feel like it's going to be that fresh for break. And the rest of the trailer barely shows anything, really, as far as it's just a cutscene, just a cinematic trailer. One thing it does seem like might be the case is that Geralt of Rivia had to make certain hand signs to cast magic, where in the cutscene it doesn't seem as much like Ciri has to make certain gestures and hand signs to cast magic. They still are doing the two swords, the steel sword, the silver sword, and potions and things like that, but Ciri, I believe, was a little bit more magical anyways, so they may be planning on speeding up the whole experience as far as fighting monsters. But I don't expect too much else is really going to change. Yeah. And the Witcher series basically has to have a story where whoever the Witcher protagonist is, they have to be somewhat antagonistic to the people around them, somewhat antagonistic to the governments running those countries. Otherwise, they really would not have enough going for them as far as the narration goes. So yeah, I imagine that's going to be more of the same too. Bigger news I imagine also is that Witcher 4 is just going to take forever to come out, and we hope it actually comes out in a good playable experience and isn't just trying to push the graphics too hard and like Cyberpunk, and isn't just a horrible launch like Cyberpunk. The Sifu Studios Slow Clap announces Rematch, which is a 5 vs 5 online soccer football game, seemingly not having any licenses to it. It is interesting considering how often sports games have been overlooked in previous Game Awards for as long as it's been going, that we have 2 soccer games being trailered here. To me, this feels like they've just taken a design cue from, what is that car one where you're knocking the soccer ball into the fence. Yeah. It is actually kind of surprising nobody has just tried to take that fairly successful car game where you're driving around knocking the ball into a net and just converted it back to actual soccer. Yeah, nothing there. Nothing wrong looking there. 5 vs 5 might be a problem for some football fans. Not real. I don't really know. I think a lot of times soccer can be 5 vs 5. Soccer, as I understand from Ted Lasso, has weird rules where you can basically have more than 5 or less than 5 people on the field. So keeping it 5 vs 5. That gaming wise might be difficult to find 10 people all wanting to play together. But yeah, nothing wrong with that so far, at least from my perspective, but it certainly doesn't seem like it's going to have the FIFA lineup and the likenesses of anybody famous. And it is weird that the Sifu studio is doing this, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Sifu studio is actually struggling financially, and this is their way of going in a different direction, or maybe making some quick cash. And if this fails, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last game Slow Clap gets to make. Thick as Thieves is the next game from the Deus Ex and Thief Leads studio, Other Side, which that means that the leads of Deus Ex, I guess the original Deus Ex and Thief, the original Thief, are not working at Bethesda. That being said, I would say Thick as Thieves does not inherently feel like, to me, like it is anything particularly close to what Deus Ex or Thief were. This may very well also be a case where you have leads like Warren Spector being promoted like they are the entirety of what makes a good game, and they know how to make good games by themselves. So inherently, this looks like there might be consistent tracks and layouts to different rooms and buildings in the world, and that it isn't just randomly generated worlds, although it might be better if it was randomly generated. And then there are specific character classes, which one would assume you would do better to not let everybody play as the same character class. And then they are running around robbing specific built places. And then I imagine they have to actually deliver the item. So yeah. For all I know, that could be a MOBA when all is said and done. But not yeah, multiplayer online battle arena type game. But yeah, nothing particularly too impressive there from that trailer either. Playing as a thief in particular limits your character classes to some extent. Well, I'm just finding out here through Video Games Chronicle that the Pokemon TCG Pocket second expansion set is releasing next week, which, yeah, definitely feels like it's time. That being said, I have not gotten all the cards from the first expansion set. I have gotten about 1,100 cards overall, and I think I've gotten 220 out of maybe 230 cards, but there definitely feels like there are either special variants I've missed a lot of, and that there are specific cards that I've completely missed. But it definitely feels like time. The solo player event has ended. I got everything done with that. That was like a Venusaur solo player event, leaving really the only player versus player event to happen right now, which is the second event, which wants you to get 5 consecutive wins. And yeah, that's asking a lot, certainly. And that certainly has been one of the things that I've been wasting time on, that and watching a lot of variations on the theme as far as isekai anime series like The Rising of the Shield Hero, and Imminence and Shadow, which are kind of the same concept done in very different ways. I would say Imminence and Shadow is a pretty low effort series compared to Rising of the Shield Hero, although Rising of the Shield Hero does have some red flag weirdness to it too. So yeah, I will certainly appreciate some expansion as far as what cards are available and just some more variety, because it definitely is the case that I'm running into a lot of people who are just playing the same Mewtwo strategy deck, and usually you don't have that problem with long-standing collectible card games where you launch a new digital version of it and there's basically one winning strategy and one winning deck. But it definitely seems like it's the case here for Pokemon TCG Pocket. Yeah, there's still a lot of cases where I'm winning and losing based on coin flips, and I don't really appreciate that. Or winning and losing based on luck. I might not be so upset about that had they not required 5 consecutive wins, which would imply the game is going to be completely skill based, which it definitely isn't. Mafia the Old Country trailer leaked online. We don't really need to talk about that since the official trailer is out. Let's see. Plucky Squire gets a brand new streamline mode with less hand holding. Interesting. I imagine that would mean it reduces the number of mandatory tutorials in the game. Well, it's kind of crazy in 2024 to be releasing games with mandatory tutorials to an extent that people are complaining in the first place. Although, notably, while the Plucky Squire was talked about a lot, I'm not hearing any reviews and not seeing people sing its praises either. Let's see, Sony has confirmed its interest in acquiring FromSoft's parent company Kadokawa. I thought that was already pretty much confirmed. Which, yeah. Kadokawa is also the anime series for Rising of the Shield Hero, so if Sony, the parent company of Sony Interactive Entertainment, the Sony PlayStation division, acquired Kadokawa, which has a whole bunch of businesses it's in, it's going to be a bigger merger than just Kadokawa games showing up in as PlayStation exclusives or getting more funding to get sequels. Yeah. Now, like most mergers, it's probably not going to be better for gamers if something like that did go through. But I don't have a lot of faith that it won't go through. Like, I haven't heard any stories of the Japanese government trying to prevent monopolies. You know, seems like acquisitions like that are pretty much rubber stamped in Japan, although acquisitions like that don't happen that often in Japan either. Xbox partners with a Dart star named Luke the Nuke Littler for a short sponsorship. That is barely news, and weird news specifically to put out so close to the Game Awards. Does that perhaps mean that some kind of darts game is going to be released from Microsoft? Maybe, but if it did, I wouldn't be surprised if it was some kind of free minigame thing and not even something they're selling. Otherwise, I imagine they are just literally targeting the darts fandom to promote Xbox, where I could see there's probably a decent amount of overlap between those fandoms. I don't see a direct connection. Also, I have to say, Luke the Nuke here needs something done on his face, unless this is some kind of weird skin condition, which, I mean, I guess it could be. This guy feels like he's intentionally just covered his face in, I don't even know what it could be, because in darts, you're not usually touching anything black. You would be touching a white chalk, if anything. Wonder if perhaps he has some kind of skin condition that maybe that's the reason why they chose him. Yeah. I don't know what that would be other than straight up skin cancer, or just like some kind of werewolfism. It's not literally called werewolfism, but there is a condition where hair grows uncontrollably. I've seen it, though mostly in Indian people. But yeah, it seems like he might have what they used to call werewolfism. Just massive patches of hair growing. His forehead here seems like it's got patches of hair growing too. And this odd growth as far as just an imbalance. Although, perhaps that is just also the camera and the lighting is really bad, and maybe there is just lighter hair and beard that's just not being seen. But yeah, I don't know how you take this picture and not say, hey, this does not look right. Kind of feels like there's a sharp line here in particular where he may, if he does have just a massive overgrowth of hair, like on the tip of his nose too, yeah, he may have to like wax around his eyes, and it may just be such an incredibly painful and consistent thing. Well, I also thought they had laser hair removal for that, but maybe the UK medical system doesn't pay for that. Or maybe he's trying to be loud and proud about it. I definitely wish some of that information was here. Let's just Google search his name and see what we can find out. Or DuckDuckGo search his name and see what we can find out on Wikipedia. Yeah, that image looks a lot better there. Let's see if there's anything medical listed here at all. No, I'm not seeing anything medical being mentioned here. I think it literally is just a really, really bad photo. Yeah. Just, if anything, I think that highlights how terrible lighting can go. And maybe a bad haircut, and maybe actually just being dirty. All of which a photographer should point out. Like, that is crazy. That is just crazy. That you can go from that to that. I mean, shouldn't even be putting out a photo like that. Like, that is insane. According to his Wikipedia, which I skimmed there, it seems like he's a very young success, so catching him early as a sponsorship may have been the reason that they chose him. The Tetris version for the NES and Tetris DX for the Game Boy Color are now available on Switch Online. Neither games have been released before. I don't even think that they inherently are too different from other versions of Tetris, but they certainly are things that people have been nostalgic for. And certainly had those games been re-released over the years, then that would have been one of many building blocks that would have prevented so much people embracing ROMs. Had it been easy and convenient to purchase those games instead, people wouldn't have bought RetroPies and Raspberry Pis and built them as much. A small percentage of those people. Let's see, the Epic Games Store is giving away 16 free games over Christmas. They do this every year, and even if I grabbed all 16 of them, I would never play any of them on the Epic Games Store. And frankly, I don't even think it's really affecting Epic's bottom line to give away these games at this point, since they are consistently doing it. I don't think it's improving their player base. I don't think it's costing them that much money. may not be costing them too much. The Marvel Rivals director, who probably would be best to keep his mouth shut and just enjoy the success so far of Marvel Rivals, has said that he thought Concord flopped because it didn't bring any unique value. Which, yeah. I think, and I saw another YouTuber go down this path too, I think if you're going to make direct comparisons to Marvel Rivals and Concord visually was just not appealing and attractive or intriguing. Marvel Rivals has massive amounts of success there because they are already leaning on established characters that have been designed and polished over the years, even if you don't really know who the characters are. So, yeah. And I feel like this comment from the Marvel Rivals director was possibly in direct response from the Concord developer whining that his game failed and got canceled, which in fairness, if he's going to whining about that, he should be whining about the fact that Sony didn't put any publishing promotion effort into it and didn't really give it any time to slowly grow. But even at a cursory glance, this character here feels random and weird, whereas this character here is iconic. And has had like decades to be built into the subconscious of the minds. Like, if I was to guess, this is some kind of weird alien that maybe is based off of something like a squid or an octopus, although the closest I would compare it to is maybe the Red Skull in Marvel. If I was to guess, if I didn't know who Venom was, I'd go, well, he's got some kind of spider on his back, so clearly there's some spider element to it. He seems to have some black goo tentacles, so I would assume that his major attack. He does look fairly similar to Spider-Man, so I would assume that I could figure out he's related to Spider-Man in some way. I could definitely say he looks very strong and he looks very wild from that character. And even his attack feels strong and wild. This guy streams select games they own on console. Which, weren't they able to do that before? I'm confused here. Is this, if you bought the game through the Windows Store on PC, you can now stream it to your Xbox One and Xbox Series X or S? Or is this just saying that some of the games that weren't streamable before, or maybe no games were streamable before on the console, are now streamable? Or is this perhaps them saying you don't have to put a disc in to verify whether you own the game or not? In the alpha skip ahead and alpha rings, those will also have Game Pass Ultimate members. You can play via cloud streaming on PC, phone, tablet, handheld. And so now they've expanded that to also be you can play it streaming on consoles. I can't help but think that Microsoft's flippantness and inconsistency on what direction they want to go, and Xbox in particular in that case, is going to lead to them pushing a lot of people to owning games and really just streaming games instead of downloading games and playing them locally, for them to eventually just kind of de-emphasize or get rid of that feature altogether when they realize that just costs too much money or too much bandwidth or too much in servers. And and then all of a sudden I feel like it's going to go back to them trying to sell you downloads of games. Clearly they don't want to go back to selling physical discs of games. They don't want disk drives in consoles for the next generation, I'm sure, but yeah, streaming right now feels like it is just them proposing a solution for a problem nobody has. Although streaming could be nice on a PC or phone, it's just not likely going to be used that often because the experience playing on a phone in particular is just going to be so different. Also, it's worth pointing out that the Xbox controller's not really Bluetooth, so I don't know how you connect a Xbox Microsoft style controller that's official to a cell phone to play a streaming game. These are all fairly new games that are being shown here, and several of them are somewhat simplistic games, although Cyberpunk 2077 isn't. And that's really where your sales pitch would happen, is we've got the most visually demanding games running on our servers at 4K in highest resolutions possible, and then we're just streaming the video down to you. Star Fox's artist Omega 6 confirms a English release date. Nintendo veteran Takayama Imamura, its new game has been confirmed for the Switch. Which, yeah, this definitely feels like an old school 80s, if not 70s anime style that just does not feel like it really has a place in modern animation. And yeah, this doesn't really feel particularly Star Foxy either. Yeah, I imagine the deal there is that he's been working with Nintendo, and Star Fox 64 with its 3D polygons in particular was definitely going to be a different direction to go. And this one screenshot just screams some heavy influences slash stealing. You effectively have Bender from Futurama here. You have a Klingon, I believe Klingon bird of prey from Star Trek here. You have a generic fighting guy, and then a generic hooded samurai guy. Generic fighting girl. Fox-like creature, insect-like creature from Ninja Turtles, one of the Ninja Turtle bad guys. Big forehead anime girl over here, which, yeah, that forehead is way bigger than the other two characters. So yeah, I wonder if you could just straight up do a full Futurama comparison here. Let's see, would this maybe be Zoidberg, Bender, Fry, Leela, the other girl in Futurama. This might be Zoidberg, actually. Yeah. Maybe this is the professor equivalent. Yeah. There's some fairly obvious direct connections to Futurama. Although in fairness, I guess Futurama is doing very generic, stereotypical, prototypical characters too. And there is a fair amount of difference here too. None of this feels like Star Fox, however. The new Donkey Kong Country Returns HD trailer shows off co-op and modern mode. I think this might be an older story. Even if it isn't, it's not a very relevant story now in the face of all of the Game Awards announcements, which are overwhelming, and we've gone nearly an hour and 50 minutes and we still have 3 more Video Games Chronicle headlines. Now the good news is once we get into the Komatsu headlines and everything else, there's a decent chance it'll be a lot of redundancies and we may burn through the news fairly quickly, but this is going to be a slower experience, to say the least. Let's see. December's PlayStation Plus game catalogs and classic titles were revealed. Sonic Frontiers, Forspoken. Forspoken actually came out, come to think of it. Didn't succeed. Rabbids Party of Legends and more joining PlayStation Plus. Yeah. And I suppose I do have a slight wish that every year when you start to get announcements for these games, that you have people coming back and trying to fix some of the failures that maybe had a little bit of a chance, that maybe had a small fandom, but it's never the case. A game like Forspoken, which they spent a lot of time promoting and hyping, just gets brushed under the rug and forgotten about, where I wouldn't be intrigued to see if somebody says, you know what, we're going to relaunch Forspoken and we're going to make it a lot better, or we're going to take those concepts of Forspoken and give it a different name so it's not associated with failure whenever you Google search it, but we're going to take those concepts that we're going to double down on it and we're going to try, because we really had some confidence in those concepts. We just didn't implement it well, or we didn't promote it well. And I think a lot of times games fail just because they're not promoted well. The publisher doesn't do their job more than the game developer doesn't do their job. Yeah, and this is the Wallace and Gromit Animation Studio announcement for Pokemon. So these are older stories. Astrobot's Winter Wonderland certainly helping it win the Game of the Year award. And then that's going to bring us to Gamatsu. So Virtua Fighter 5 Revo launches January 28th. Weirdly though, this remake is going to already be in the shadow of what seems like a soft reboot from Virtua Fighter. Seems weird that you would rush out a new announcement for a new Virtua Fighter game, assuming that they aren't promoting the same thing and they've just confused me with that new trailer. But I think they announced a new game different from this, because this still feels a little polygony, and I would assume that this is just a remaster of something from like 10 years ago. AI Limit has been delayed to March 27th, 2025, which this may be the twist that we'll start to see from Gamatsu in particular, which covers more Japanese games, is that all of a sudden we're going to see a lot of Japanese games move out of the way of the announcements that were just made, although I imagine it will take a few days before that happens. AI Limit looks like it could be something. A Souls-like female protagonist action RPG. I saw a YouTuber who said they were able to scrape all of the database of Steam, and there's apparently somewhere around 470 different tags, which is way too many tags, frankly. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Generally in a database, yes, having the more tags the better, but also in reality, I could see limiting it down to 200 styles of tags, and merging a bunch of tags in your backend. I could also see Valve, if they were going to curate what gets published more, limiting the number of tags that developers and publishers use, because let's face it, not that many gamers or reviewers are adding tags to games, and then using certain tags as red flags for ways in which games can be further evaluated, whether they're good enough quality to be on the store, whether they need to be in the adult section. It is still very crazy to me that you can have tags like nudity or sexual content or hentai, and then not automatically have to put your game in the adult section behind an age gate. But somehow that still happens on a near daily basis. Yeah, we don't really need to go through all of the game awards. Even the nominations definitely didn't feel like there were going to be any major surprises there. If anything, I guess Metaphor ReFantagio getting the best narrative is somewhat surprising. I could see them giving it to Senua's Saga Hellblade, or maybe even Silent Hill 2, although they are certainly between a rock and a hard place, because 3 out of the 5 games there are Japanese companies: Atlas, Sega, and Square Enix. It's almost always been the case, though, that narrative was better from Japanese games, generally speaking. This isn't a particularly good layout here, in that it's only slightly brighter, and that might be my fault for how I've changed the way this page looks. As far as actual humans getting an award, Best Performance goes to Melina Jorgens. I believe it's how you pronounce that, for Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, although it doesn't even say what character she voiced or what main character she voiced. It does seem weird. If you don't want to gender it and go have a best male performer or best female performer, then they should probably give out at least 2 awards for best performance, or best performance runner-up awards. In fairness, best performance runner-up would be interesting, but inherently I kind of feel like the SJWs that are the judges of the Game Awards are always going to give best performance to a female actor, and over time there's going to be like 5-10 years straight in which no male actor has ever won an award. I don't even know what Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown did as far as accessibility goes. And Games for Impact gave a Neva, which is a game I don't recognize. Electro getting Best Mobile Game. Batman Arkham Shadow getting Best VR Augmented Reality Game, which I believe Google just announced a new augmented reality headset in partnership with Samsung, which might go somewhere, but very likely won't. Very possibly won't. Also, Google TV, YouTube TV, has also increased its price by 14%, yet again making it as expensive as having a cable subscription. Yeah. So, whole nonsense. And we have a content creator of the year called Queso. I have no idea who that even is. An esports people that I imagine I won't really recognize, although Faker is recognizable. Alright, so at 2 hours in, I'm going to have to take a break, unfortunately. So we'll come over here to Yu-Gi-Oh! Not that I'm really playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And yet somehow have some gems still that I can claim. Alright, so I'm going to pause the recording and then take a bathroom break, and then I will be back in like 20 minutes. Okay, I'm back. So, while I was taking that break, I saw another YouTuber talking about Ciri being the female protagonist, main protagonist, only protagonist, as far as we know, in The Witcher 4 or Witcher IV. And it definitely feels like there's either a real controversy or perhaps even, if you want to put on the tinfoil hat, a fake controversy being promoted online as far as people hating it being Ciri or hating it being a female in general. Definitely seems like a lot of people on Reddit also were hoping that this would have taken place well into the past when the Witchers were way more prevalent instead of taking place in the future, where Witchers are going to be still extremely rare. Although inherently, I think you kind of ruin the vibe of the Witcher series if all of a sudden there's just a ton of Witchers and they're perhaps more accepted in society in the first place. It does seem like on Reddit there's some people who also wanted just a custom character creator, which if they are setting up a whole new story based on none of the previous books, it would kind of make sense to just let you have a character creator and create your own Witcher in the game. But the reason I would even suggest a tinfoil hat conspiracy, other than it may just be fun, is that I am noticing a severe lack of communication and controversy around the fact that the Witcher 4 trailer shows absolutely no actual gameplay. Let's roll history back and remember what that Cyberpunk 2077 trailer looked like when it was first announced, with the robotic lady and bullets flying all around her. That robotic lady not playing any role in the actual story of the final game once it was released. That trailer looking very pretty, but being 100% not anything close to what the final product was. And inherently, that is the trailer we see right now for The Witcher 4. Is you're seeing an animation studio make a cutscene that very likely will not match what the actual game looks like, and probably won't even match what the other cutscenes look like, knowing how previous Witcher games used in-game engines to make the cutscenes for the most part also. So yeah, there is reason, I suppose, to perhaps be a little bit peeved on that, in that you're being sold something that is effectively just a lie at the moment, in the hopes that you'll accept what is delivered later. And we've all had that experience where you see something that looks really tasty on a menu, and then you get delivered slop on a plate that looks nothing like the picture. Fast food restaurants in particular, notorious for that, seeing McDonald's burgers and such on looking really good on TV and then getting nothing close to that when you actually go to a McDonald's drive-thru. Moving on, we still probably have a lot of time, even though we are going to go through a lot of repetitive stuff now through Gamatsu. But yeah, with Gamatsu, perhaps we'll have slightly more screenshots to kind of highlight who this character is and what the game is about. I suppose it is an interesting thought. Did we even have a single new game that had a male protagonist? Like, undoubtedly, it probably happened. I wouldn't be surprised if more than 50% of all the games in the trailers announced at the Game Awards actually have male protagonists in them. But off the top of my head right now, the ones that are noticeable is Ciri from Witcher 4 and I guess Baldy here. Let's see. Well, let's keep an eye out for that and just see if we can even get a general balance. This Crimson Desert game has a male protagonist. Yeah. Suppose it is worth. It looks like it might be the scan of an actual actor. Probably is. It's worth pointing out, though, that it really isn't a divide between female protagonist and male protagonist that people often are upset with, or at least there are controversies that make it seem like people are upset. It may be very well that there's just a bunch of internet trolls and bots that are pushing these concepts and no real person is actually upset at all. It is very much often the case of is there in a what you would typically describe as blue hair female protagonist, some SJW female protagonist that just on the first assumptive glance, just judging a book by the character, by the cover, do they feel like they are being designed specifically to be woke or to propagate or antagonize against what has been in the past considered traditional female beauty in its many different forms. And the previous Baldy character is potentially either going in a very wild art style that maybe that's what they think works for that character, or is just going in a very weird anti-feminine art style. There was definitely in previous decades arguments that were made when women, often women of color, were attacked by other women for not having the traditional straight hair, long hair art style. So when the punk movement happened and women were shaving their heads or putting it up in a spikes or something like that, that was often attacked by other women as well as men as just being being masculine and being ugly and being unacceptable, and often even having more African traditional style of hair was derided by both women and men in previous centuries. So yeah, there's something to that. And same thing about women with muscles is that even today there are definitely people who will attack women who have more muscular builds. Most recently they attack them by just calling them masculine looking or accusing them of being transgender even if they aren't. So having all of that in that one character is a lot, certainly, to take. It's a unique character, but we want unique characters. In direct contrast, this character from Crimson Desert, if anything I'm saying right now makes any sense, is about the most boring character you could have. I can't even, like, they don't even really have a screenshot showing his face in the list of screenshots here. So yeah, he's some kind of almost like Viking character, but too well shaved, too well kempt, and black hair, black beard, black cloak. It's not particularly intriguing to look at him from the back. It's not particularly intriguing to look at him from the front. Although that is, in fairness, what a lot of characters tend to be in games, is fairly boring characters. And I imagine there's never really that many controversies around having just a generic, boring character in your game. Kami sequel announced. Did we show off this trailer? Do I want to show off a trailer? Let's skip around a little bit and see. Yeah. Inherently, if you are going to make an Okami sequel, you have to question whether it's really going to play the way Okami plays on PC right now, or whether it's going to play completely differently, or whether it's somehow going to only really come out for the next Nintendo console, which we assume will still have motion Wii-like controls, which Okami was a fairly large success, uniquely because of its Wii controls and the paintbrush motions. Now, Dispatch I haven't talked about too much. It's a modern superhero workplace comedy where you're kind of a superhero, but you get benched to work at a dispatch to dispatch other superheroes because, I don't know, you're injured or you're not authorized to go out, which makes it seem like at least a third of the game is just going to be the strategy game where you are managing a roster and deploying heroes. I think there's some fairly big voice actors behind it, which may be them spending way too much budget on voice actors, and I wouldn't be surprised if the game itself isn't particularly that interesting and people just get kind of tricked into it. You have these Telltale style dialogue prompts also at times, what looks like might be a little bit of a mini game, but I do think the majority of your experience is going to be strategy. You have a lot of animation here, so maybe it'll have a decent amount of cutscenes, but yeah. And certainly this is the kind of thing that I feel like maybe should have been a animated series instead of a video game. If you had gotten all these voice actors and this style of animation to do just a Netflix 13 episode, 26 episode cartoon, that concept maybe would have worked better. But yeah, seems like Aaron Paul may be funding some of this in particular, so it may get a lot more sales than it really deserves because of that. But yeah, the reality of the game is going to be a lot of this Telltale style stuff and a lot of mini games and probably minimal cutscenes, if there's even a decent finished product here in the first place, which is a question certainly. I don't think we really need to watch the trailer for Mafia the Old Country. You're going to clearly not have the voodoo doll like in Mafia 3, and I imagine you're mostly just going to be running around doing GTA style stuff, which, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if GTA 6 comes out and gets forgotten about fast enough that Mafia the Old Country can come in years later. I mean it's not going to be years later if it actually comes out in the summer of 2025. It's going to come out just months later after GTA 6. So I wouldn't be surprised if people completely ignore Mafia the Old Country just because of GTA 6. The right move almost certainly would be to have pushed it further back. Sonic Racing Cross Worlds announced for all consoles and PC for Sonic fandoms. Last of Us Part 2 Remastered coming to PC April 3rd. And again, I just kind of feel like they are dragging their feet to a new game from Naughty Dog, or another Last of Us game, or another Uncharted game. A sci-fi racer reimagining Screamer has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. This is some kind of sci-fi racing. It's fairly limited in the screenshots. I have a hard time believing this is really what the gameplay is going to look like. Seems like it's just kind of all over the place. Double Dragon Revive launches October 23rd, 2025. This is the Double Dragon nobody really was happy with because it takes the 2D animation style of Double Dragon and makes it a 3D CGI fighting game. You know, you have flat 2D animation that's also different from what people would have seen in previous Double Dragon games, but then you have completely different animation style here. Let's see. It's been, I think, a fairly long time since any Double Dragon game has been made. And see, even this 3D CGI animation is not really, I think, showing what the game is, because I think the actual gameplay is going to have the characters much more zoomed out, fighting multiple enemies at once as a beat 'em up, not as a fighting game, which this trailer seems to really imply to you that it's a fighting game, one-on-one fighting game, and that's just not, I think, what it's going to be. Hello Games and Ghost Town Games announced a co-op adventure game called Stage Fright for PC. This too feels a lot like It Takes Two, although this trailer barely showed anything at all. And I definitely just don't think that there is room in the world for two It Takes Two sequel games. This is a little bit more cartoony and may very well not have as much of a story focus as split narrative or split fiction. Yeah. This may have more of a gameplay mechanic thing, where there's, it may very well just be an infinite runner. Yeah. And Stage Fright doesn't really imply that it's going to be a split world anywhere, as well as split fiction does. Split fiction. Seems like maybe sometimes you're playing together. It's another co-op only game, though. And it's worth pointing out that any co-op game tends to be online co-op first, if not only online co-op, instead of split screen. Dying Light the Beast launches in the summer of 2025, which we can make a YouTube short around that too. I imagine this is going to play very similar to Dying Light and Dying Light 2. It's just going to be set in a different world and less of a focus and story that you would have had from Dying Light 2. A Dungeon and Fighter game, ARAD, has debut trailers, details, and screenshots. If this was promoted during the Game Awards, I missed it completely. And yeah, as far as new announcements, if this was at the Game Awards, that would be so far the only really anime style games. that we've seen announced so far. Onimusha Way of the Sword announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. We should keep an eye out to see if we're seeing any difference here as far as what's getting announced for what, as far as PlayStation versus Xbox versus PC. Of course, not a huge surprise that very few of these are saying they're coming out for the Switch, since we're about to get a new Nintendo console, which I wouldn't be surprised if several of these games do get updated to have Switch support, Switch 2 support later on. I don't think they're going to have day and date releases for a while. These screenshots really more just inspirational photos than anything. Not showing a lot as far as the Onimusha game. It definitely seems like sometimes the screenshots are exactly the same when you get to the Steam page, but sometimes they are completely different. Honestly, I was thinking we would go through a lot more Gematsu articles today, but maybe we will do that Monday, because this is the last one we have. Elden Ring Night Rain announced for the PS4 and 5, which that is different, the Xbox One and Series and PC, so previous generation support, which I definitely would say they probably rushed to the PS5. And the PS4 in particular is still very viable as far as a console to have. Although I wouldn't inherently suggest getting a PS4 on the cheap for Christmas this year or anything like that. This will be the first year that I will have been looking at gamingonlinux.com for around the Game Awards, and I heavily suspect that there's going to be very little coverage because none of these new games announced on the Game Awards are targeting the Steam Deck. They're much bigger AAA, quadruple A style games, and even if they were targeting the Steam Deck, I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft is literally paying for them to not mention the Steam Deck or Linux in any way as far as Linux gaming goes. Again, it does not seem to me like they were even giving away Steam Decks during the Game Awards this year, so it seems like that relationship has ended. What Gaming on Linux is talking about is that Direct3D 12 to Vulkan project VK3D Proton version 2.14 is now out with various performance updates. Yeah, which got a full changelog here under a collapsed box, which in fairness is probably a decent way to do that, although I just don't see a real reason to actually have it behind a collapsed box unless you're just trying to get the viewer's eyes down to the bottom of the page where there might be more ads. I guess if I didn't have ad blockers on, I would see more ads there. Turok Origins announced, and it's now a third-person shooter with co-op, coming from Gaming on Linux. Which I would have to assume that they are just kind of a fan of the Turok series. I went on to a rant several streams ago, a week or two ago, about hunting and like proper realistic hunting. And certainly you're still not getting that here, but yeah, that's an interesting thought. No details at all as far as what OS it will be available for. If it does support like Linux or Mac OS. Does this page even link to previous Turok games? Or would the algorithm actually be good enough to point you to Turok games? think the answer to that is no on both counts. Slay the Spire 2 has gotten its first trailer. It's coming in early access of 2025. The Illuminati has returned in the massive Helldivers 2 update out now. Yeah. Elden Ring Night Rain co-op spin-off has been announced, so we are getting more talks of games on PC, I guess. But yeah, maybe that's how gaming on Linux is going to deal with the Game Awards, is just highlight games that are specifically coming to Steam and then hope that those games are also going to be compatible on SteamOS and other Linuxes. Here's SteamOS version 3.6.21 beta, labeled the update of the year, fixes security issues plus Indiana Jones and the Great Circle rendering issues. Let's see. Adding support for the 8-bit controller uniquely. Some of these are just security updates. I wouldn't be surprised if SteamOS tries to slow things down over the Christmas holiday and just not put out betas or updates until they get back into the offices in January. That would make a lot of sense to me. It would also make a lot of sense to leave SteamOS for the most part where it is around the Christmas holiday season, so you're not having people potentially break their brand new Steam Decks with updates or waiting to play with their brand new Steam Decks because of updates. With the refurbished devices on sale, if you can get them by December 25th, which maybe they won't actually appear on December 25th, but then you could still do IOU type packages under the Christmas tree. But yeah, if you can get them in the hands of kids this Christmas, it suddenly did become somewhat a decent thought to buy one. Still a pretty good thought to not buy a Steam Deck right now and wait 6 months and then save up for the next Nintendo console that's coming out in the next 3, maybe 4 months at most. 6 months from now, there might be a proper refresh of the Steam Deck, or at least there might be something else to consider. Inherently, had they come out with a console-like device that plugged into a TV but was cheaper because it didn't have a touchscreen on it, then I probably would have picked that instead of a Steam Deck. I really don't need the portability that the Steam Deck offers. It'd be nice if all devices were like that, but I would love a device that was 2-3 times as powerful and was just like a console that plugged into the TV. Which right now I have plenty of TVs to go around. So yeah, The Witcher 4 revealed with Ciri as the protagonist is pretty much the only news that's coming out about that. I also would say, while she does look older, she doesn't inherently look that awful for that universe and that world. So, unless she looks inherently worse when the game actually gets made, there might be some controversy around that. But then there potentially is going to be controversy if they change the way she looks either way. If she looked better, there might be controversy around that. There's a real danger here, particularly with The Witcher, that there's just going to be a culture war being fought on Reddit for months and months before the game ever is released, and then there will just be so much mud being slung between trolls and bots and a few real people that it will leave a bitter taste in the mouth of anybody who actually wanted to play the game. Last of Us Part 2 Remastered coming to PC April 3rd. Prime Gaming games being listed here that you can get. Yeah. A lot of these through different launchers still. None of these through Steam anymore. New Arcline is promising a new RPG about the conflict between magic and engineering. Interesting concept. Not a game I saw a trailer for, so this might just be something that actually wasn't at the Game Awards. Ryzen Zero Dawn Remastered version 1.4 brings various controller fixes plus improvements to AMD FSR and Intel XeSS. They are still singing the praises of the new Intel video card as a budget video card that is seemingly pretty good. Now, inherently though, it's still kind of a tough call to say you should build a gaming PC but then buy an Intel integrated or an Intel not integrated GPU just to save a few bucks. It'd be a good choice, I guess, if you knew you were going to upgrade in 6 months or so, but yeah, I'd still almost certainly recommend an AMD graphics card or probably an NVIDIA graphics card that was way more expensive if you're trying to build a gaming PC that actually is going to be capable of gaming. Let's see. Inspired by Disco Elysium and Fallout, Weather Factory has announced a game called Traveling at Night, which definitely looks different, to say the least, based on this screenshot. Golf with Your Friends 2 has been announced for early access in 2025. Swordhaven Iron Conspiracy is a party-based RPG from the Dims of Atom RPG. It is now in the early access. Let's see, this is arguably fairly old information that's just getting repeated as a highlighted story from Gaming on Linux that the Steam Deck has hit 17,000 games playable and verified. If the numbers I saw were accurate, that there's roughly 140,000 games on Steam, then that does still really highlight that there is only about 10% that have been labeled as playable and verified. That being said, if there really are 140,000 games on Steam, I wouldn't be surprised if 100,000 of them are games that nobody ever would want to play in the first place. And yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if there was 100,000 games that actually will run perfectly well on the Steam Deck, but nobody has tested them at all because nobody's ever played those games. And inherently, that's my concern with the Steam store in the first place, is having potentially like 400 tags is the equivalent of having 400 aisles in a grocery store. It's just way too much for any one human to shop through and look through. Tags are slightly different than that, since you can have multiple tags and they don't have to inherently be unique, but my concern with the Steam website is that there's just a lot of below the sewer content that is just cluttering good content, and that there is room for curation of some level. To the point where if they cleaned up their storefront, if they did just some good housekeeping, then they could probably improve their algorithm. It'd be great if they could just improve their algorithm right now and not have to declutter the storefront in the first place, but that's not really what's happening. It's the same problem with like YouTube, in that the recommendation algorithms are going to show you just the top 1% of content being made and content creators out there, It's not going to suggest random content creators with no views, or at least not very often. Speaking of views, I saw in my last stream it looked like I got 2 views, and then I went back later and it said I got 0 views. So I'm like, oh yeah, great. Not super surprised that people wouldn't be watching YouTube in the middle of Christmas holiday, though. It's not particularly the time of season I'd expect to get a ton of new viewers. Then Valve's new branding guidelines. At this point, if they were going to announce any new hardware stuff, the assumption is that it would be at CES in the new year and not during Christmas. It really is too late. December 13th. It is way too late to announce a new product unless you're doing something that you know you have very few of them. Like if you only had 1,000 of some new device and you knew it was going to sell like hotcakes, then you could do a limited launch. But that never really is a good way to do things. I don't think Nintendo was wise to have a run on Wii's when the Wii came out and have people standing in lines back in the day when people did stand in lines for Wii's. Moving on to GameDeveloper.com, I imagine all these stories are going to be older stories. IGN, GameIndustry.biz, and Humble are losing talent to soft layoffs. The media conglomerate Ziff Davis has been asking employees to jump ship. Yeah, Ziff Davis around for a long time, although inherently I'm not sure anybody is particularly that important at any of these websites, and if they were important, you would think they would get their own article and people would actually name them as far as who is actually jumping ship. It's hard to not dance on the grave of mainstream video game journalists for as poorly as they have run their own business, for as poorly as they have misrepresented what the average gamer is interested in and wants to talk about, for as poorly as they've given even basic purchasing advice, often hyping up things or having scales that only start at 7 and go as high as 10. They really have just not been serving any good purpose as far as the actual audience that would want to read their articles or see things, see any content from them. And inherently, because they can't get the eyes of gamers, they inherently are not getting the eyes of ad sellers, who are the real people that are paying them. It is perhaps a better thing if companies like IGN just go out of business, so a new standard can be established that any potential new video game website embraces newer technology like TikTok and YouTube and Twitch, and has stricter ethical journalism elements in their rules, and that they're not showing ads for video games on a video game review website, and that they are not sleeping with game developers and then writing reviews of those games, which that's what started Gamergate all about. But yeah, I don't know if we really are going to have a next generation of video game websites. When I think about the kind of video game website I would make if I was going to make one, it'd be much closer to IMDb and just giving credits to people who who made the games than it would be something like Giant Bomb or IGN, where we're actually trying to report on news stories or review video games. All of that, as far as news stories, much better to be done as part of a YouTube channel than as its own separate website. Even if I got huge and had 100 people under me as a staff still would probably be websites, YouTube channels to talk about news. Now, inherently, if all of a sudden my news sources, Gamatsu, Video Games Chronicle, GameDeveloper.com, GamingOnLinux.com, if all 4 of those websites went out of business, if even one of them went out of business, then my source for news becomes less. And so that would make what I do much more difficult. But I'm not really worried about that, because inherently Ziff Davis has been the biggest, most overbloated website publishing manager company too, where there's just way too much management and way too much money being spent for something that could be done a lot cheaper. Honestly, Nextlander, when you have 3 people from Giant Bomb go and make a YouTube channel called Nextlander and do just about the same quality of content for way less of the budget, that really proves that you don't need these giant corporations to run these kinds of sites. Let's see. People Can Fly restructuring, laying off 120 devs and icing projects. I think we had already talked about that. Yeah. Exola and Starnest starting a game incubator academy in Azerbaijan. Yeah, we haven't heard a lot of stories lately of game companies trying to have more Middle Eastern style hubs of game development. I imagine that's because there's more turmoil these days in the Middle East, and that as a concept was probably never going to really work in the first place. But yeah, we haven't seen Saudi Arabia try to invest their public interest fund into anything lately either. Build a Rocket Boy acquires Play Fusion. I was expecting that there would have been a lot more acquisitions and mergers this year too, but instead it was just a ton of layoffs. Layoffs without the mergers that you would generally expect to happen before layoffs happen. Suicide Squad support ends in January. I don't think too many people are going to be sad about that. And then these are all older stories. Is itch.io still down? I guess the question. We could do a bit of research here and see if we can get a update. Let's see, itch.io. Having a .io ending and to not have itch.io.com hosted by somebody else is kind of crazy, as far as having a backup domain that would forward to the same servers. Yeah, interesting. And on the front page here you have an almost certainly not licensed Nintendo trademark logo for a game called Zelda's Adventure. And see, as I scroll down, this is just a great example of just how these small games are not really relevant enough for people to care about, and thus there wasn't a huge outcry as far as itch.io being taken down. Of course, they clearly haven't learned their lesson now that they're back up, and that if the claim is that somebody did a DMCA takedown of itch.io because of a Funko Pop copyright, then how can you have the Nintendo trademark allowed to be on there? Even if that is slightly misspelled, that is way too close to the Nintendo trademark. Plus, it's got all the Game Boy registered trademark article markings too. You could certainly have a game called Zelda's Adventure, and it could be a different character named Zelda. They don't own the trademark or copyright for Zelda, but you can't have the Nintendo logo on it. Yeah, it definitely seems like they don't know what they're doing as far as running a page on the website. But they are back up. And that's probably the last we're going to hear of that as far as that story for a while. Unless a lawsuit happens, then we might get some more details then. If no lawsuit happens, we'll probably never get any more details. Yeah, Google went very quickly from announcing AI and pretending like AI could develop games to announcing a mixed reality headset with Samsung, which noticeably not a single one of my news sources talked about that as far as an augmented reality, mixed reality headset. At some point, I do believe we probably will hit a device that is so lightweight and just so easy to wear that augmented reality starts to make sense. But I don't think we're anywhere close to that, actually, because even now, a regular pair of glasses is very, very often not worn by people who need to wear glasses, and those are going to be as light as you can get them. And even if you could comfortably wear an augmented reality glasses for 8 to 16 hours a day, it's probably not adding enough value to wear it for 8 to 16 hours a day, unless it is just some part of your actual job, which even in most cases I imagine that's not going to be the case. It's just going to be really cheaper to have a monitor in front of you than to have somebody wear augmented reality glasses. One of the things about the anime, The Rising of the Shield Hero, is that the character effectively knows he is in some kind of video game, and so it will show you a very much a video game screen being depicted while he's fighting enemies, which is weird because the narrative definitely makes it more like he cares about the people around him and the world he's in. So he is choosing to live in not only a different world, an isekai, but a different world that is seemingly a video game. But I suppose there's a way you could tell a story where it actually turns out it isn't a video game. All four of the main protagonists, the shield hero, and secondary protagonist, the other three cardinal heroes, come from completely different worlds and think that the world they're in is a different type of video game, and each of their user interfaces seem to work differently based on what they believe or how they believe the video game should be played. So one of the characters has like weapons augmentation because he believed that the video game would have that, and then as far as the shield hero hearing that, he goes, well, let me look and see if I can find something called weapons augmentation, and then it just magically appears. Of course, the elephant in the room around the shield hero is they weirdly embrace slavery. Like the shield hero definitely is totally cool with having slaves in his party in a very Japanese slavery is not so bad style of the storytelling, and I definitely feel like the animator or the writer of that manga anime has an opinion there that is out of norm. But yeah, and I try to think about that as far as, do JRPGs or any kind of video games that we play have slavery as a major factor? I don't think so, not really. Maybe there is room for a game or two to touch on such a touchy subject, but you may hire people, party members, and one would assume that when you're hiring the party members, they are working of their own free will. But yeah. I can't think of a single Japanese RPG or otherwise any RPG where you're purchasing slaves and making them fight on your side. To the point where by the time you're at the second season of Shield Hero, characters are willingly taking on magical slave contracts to be in your party. It's a weird twist, certainly. But then the rest of the series is fine, so seems just like maybe the anime got watered down, got cleaned up more than the manga. Maybe the manga makes a bigger deal about it. The rest of these GameDeveloper.com stories are not. Oh well, here's something. Note from the publisher. A change in ownership and what it means for our readers. Today, Informa Tech, the company behind GameDeveloper.com, is combining with Tech Target's technology website and Industry Dive's award-winning industry publications to create a new company called Informa Tech Target. So there is one merger that has happened here. Alright, well, it will be interesting to see if the GameDeveloper.com website changes, which means I'd have to redo my macros, or if they start covering stories slightly differently, or start covering more stories. It is noticeable that there hasn't been a lot of union talk lately from GameDeveloper.com, so maybe they'll become less pro-worker, pro-union under this new leadership. All kinds of things could change. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now GameDeveloper.com is totally shut down, or it's completely different people running it, running completely different stories. I really don't have any loyalty, though, to the current publisher and managing editors anyways. But yeah. It is not inherently video game related, but the one unionized Amazon.com shipping facility, I believe, is going on strike, in particular against Amazon.com. And I definitely have seen several videos talking about how Amazon.com potentially is pulling tricks to increase its monopoly, increase the price that you have to pay for objects, delivering things later. Not that I particularly get things so late that I really care that much about things being delivered late. I have noticed, though, that a couple of things I've had shipped claim they're going to arrive one day, and then the arrival date gets updated to be several days later, like 5 days later. And so yeah, if I was really purchasing things on a knife's edge where I absolutely had to have those things, I wouldn't trust Amazon.com now. Even if I paid for overnight shipping or 2-day shipping, I'm not sure you're really going to get that. But I'm still overall getting things fast enough. My game sells off the hyper-casual games publisher Mambo. So, I don't know why we saw that new letter from the editor story as one of the last GameDeveloper.com stories. It should have been one of the first. Anyways, let's go through all the new games on Steam and end this, because this has already been 3 hours. And I imagine I need to be fairly generous as to what I'm going to make a YouTube short around today. Yeah. It looked like that might have been a story based on Moses, but it still didn't look like a good enough game. At some point, if I was ever going to go down the Five Nights at Freddy's iceberg, I would like to figure out whether people like the mechanical monsters from Five Nights at Freddy's, or think that they're well written characters, or if they just don't care and only care about the games. Because it definitely seems like I've seen some fan art around Five Nights at Freddy's where the actual characters seem to be cared about more as villains or as heroes or whatever. Let's see. I'm having a real hard time right now also getting my heater and air conditioner unit to work as minimal as I'd like it to. Just having a hard time finding good times when it can stop heating while not also freezing me to death in this winter, and finding times when it should be heating. So yeah, I'm having to do a lot more tweaking than I normally do, and as soon as it gets warmer in the summer, I imagine I'm just gonna tweak everything back. The Ecobee app has apparently updated, so now you can get the kinds of analytic data that you really should have been getting for years now. I'm pretty sure the Nest did keep that analytic data from day one, and you could get some of that data if you went to the website of Ecobee, but you could not get it directly from the app. And yeah, it was just not particularly helpful in that form factor. And generally the website, I think, kind of merged everything together into just generalizations, whereas ideally on any kind of air conditioner you want to know the temperature outside, and you want to be able to match that temperature outside to the temperature set inside and the temperature felt inside. So you need a line chart with 3 lines at minimum for you to be able to compare things. And what you're looking for is the difference, the delta, between the temperature outside and the temperature inside. And you want, ideally, I think, your settings to be exactly in the middle of that difference, that delta. That way you're not just trying to match the, well, it wouldn't always be exactly that way. Certainly you could have it set, like most people would set up thermostats, where it's just set to one temperature, and then your inside temperature and your desired temperature would be just about the same always. Those paper plane games, another great example of something that just way too many of them allowed on Steam. So yeah, if I get a few seconds, I'll probably end up messing with my air conditioner some more. Yeah. As I'm cleaning house, I definitely also am having to just ask myself, it's like, how many tablecloths do I really need? Like, how many plates do I really need? Things like that. It's just a lot of stuff that I probably will never use and have years of experience knowing I've never used them. Here we have yet another non-English game, which I wouldn't be surprised if eventually it gets revealed that Steam Deck compatibility drops significantly if it doesn't support English as a language, because nobody in Japan even probably would bother or knows how to test something out and report it to SteamDB, whether it works or not. Which inherently I don't even know really how to do that. I think you just launch the game in Steam mode on SteamOS, and then if the game launches and you play it for a while, you might get a pop-up, but I'm not sure you 100% get a pop-up there. But yeah, I don't know if there's a way to actively go and report that this worked on the Steam Deck, or this works on Linux easily. There's almost certainly a way to do it. Yeah. Luigi as the name of the suspected killer. I don't want to say assassin. I don't think it's really fair to use the phrase assassin at all, because inherently it is a phrase specially made up for rich people and politically powerful people that is just never going to be used or applied to anybody else. And while a killing might be politically motivated, even trying to determine that is crazy and stupid, and just call a killing a killing. Even the hate crime concepts of adding extra charges because you think it's a hate crime, while I agree with the sentiment, just confuses the whole law part of the application of law and the punishment of people who break the law. Anyways, to get back to it, Luigi being the name of the suspect has led to several memes and pictures I've seen of Luigi from Super Mario Brothers being correlated and applied to that. And apparently Luigi figures are on prominent display still at the New York Nintendo store, so they haven't made any changes there, I imagine. But yeah, I imagine Nintendo is fairly furious that this guy is named Luigi, because definitely Nintendo is going to side with the rich man's perspective on that. Although it does seem like the vast majority of poor people are more siding with Luigi, or at least pretending to. Yeah, more jokingly, I imagine, than anything. Wasn't thinking that would be the very last thing I talked about, but that does allow me to end this just slightly over 3 hours for the stream. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.